Welcome to another episode of Chat Sports Talk. You don't know, my name's Chad. Take a dive on sports. Welcome to my Week 7 college football recap video and my updated Eliminator. It's right, another exciting weekend of college football action. We've seen a lot of top 25 showdowns, including matchups against undefeated schools. Let you know there could only be one. So we're going to go over my picks and see how I did in comparison. I kind of go over a few of the games, and there will be no extra surprises. So it'll be the 12 games I picked. But before I dive in all that nonsense, if you could go ahead and smash that thumbs up for me, especially like the content I provide you. Really appreciate you two guys. Really help promote this channel out. You can subscribe. A lot of you guys watch my work. I love you all for doing that. Now, maybe subscribe. This costs you a dime. Helps me provide more time and value for you. Now, last week I actually went 8-4, which is not bad for the 12 games. I think it's right up there with one of my best weeks, if not the best week. Not quite. I had the one that was 9-5, so right on par with that one in terms of the games and whatnot. So we're just go ahead and start off out there in Big Ten country. We're going to go over some of the games there. We'll start off in Champaign, Illinois. We're then 24th ranked Illini are playing host to Minnesota in a key Big Ten West matchup. As that Big Ten West is a very crowded grouping right now. So these games are very important to see who's going to rise to the top and maybe make a trip to Indianapolis. Now, this one I went with Illinois because I know Illinois' defense is starting to really step up and take charge. And there was no question about this one. I mean, it was a pretty stoic appearance by the Illini defense, forcing 3 interceptions, which really kind of helped personify, key aspects. I mean, that was icing the game towards the end of it. And their offense was just efficient. They didn't have to go explosive. They didn't do anything else. Chase Brown had a phenomenal day of 180 yards, but he had no touchdowns. But he did get a receiving touchdown, so yeah, he did end up scoring. And it was like a pretty easy day. I mean, Tommy DeVito didn't really have to do too much. He was only 22 of 32 for 252 yards and a touchdown. It was just nothing that Minnesota can do that really helped them out. And it was just, a very good performance by the Illini. I mean, they only got 2 sacks, but it was enough to really disrupt everything Minnesota was trying to do. And Illini was able to dominate and win 26-14. Then we head over to Ann Arbor, where Michigan was playing host to Penn State. And in the beginning, this looked like there would be a really good matchup between the two. Penn State led at halftime 14-10, and the two teams met in the back. At halftime, some pleasantries and hand gestures were exchanged back and forth. You catch my drift? It almost went down, old WWE backroom brawl scene almost. And Michigan then just decided to punch Penn State in the mouth and just run and run and run. They ran over the Lions in this game. It was not a fun scene for Penn State's defense when you had 2 Wolverine rushers having over 160 yards rushing apiece. Donovan Edwards, 173, 2 touchdowns. Blake Corum, 166 yards, 2 touchdowns. If you can do that with your running attack, you don't need to pass. McCarthy didn't have to pass. Yeah, that's why he only had 145 yards in the air. He didn't have to. He just gave it to his 2 running backs, and they did the rest. They just could not stop them. I mean, Michigan's secondary stifled Penn State's passing attack running game couldn't really take off. They only had, a little over 100 yards rushing total, and mainly the running attack by Michigan that just cruised to a 41-17 victory. Well, let's head down into Knoxville, where you found our first, top 10 matchup between ranked opponents. And there's a lot of history going against Tennessee on this one. They haven't beat Alabama since 2006. They haven't beaten a top 3 team in something like 19 tries. I mean, they have all these things going against them. Streaks are meant to be broken. Bryce Young made his return, and he had a phenomenal day. I mean, Tennessee jumped out early and went up 21-7 after in one quarter. So I was like, oh great, here we go. But Alabama is being tenacious. It just kept battling back and just double up the scores each quarter, winning the next 2 quarters to make the final frame one to watch. But Bryce Young had 455 yards in the air, 2 touchdowns, where Hendon Hooker only had 385 yards, 5 touchdowns. Only 5 touchdowns, but he also threw a pick. The rushing attack, everything went through Gibbs in Alabama with 114 total yards, while Tennessee had 182 yards rushing, but they had the two rushing touchdowns, while Gibbs had the 3 touchdowns for Alabama. Receiving-wise, Hyatt over 200 yards receiving for the Vols, and grabbing all 5 touchdowns Hooker threw to him. The guy only had 6 catches, and 5 of them were TDs. So it's just one of those weird things. I mean, each one had a fumble loss. I mean, interception. I mean, the turnover ratio was moot. I mean, Alabama kind of won that one by 1. It just came down to the final play. McGrath just hit a knuckleballer that went in, sealed it for Tennessee. They stormed the field. They celebrated. They tore down the goalpost. Took it out to Tennessee River, threw it in there. Now they got a GoFundMe page for a new goalpost. Really? Sorry, a major university didn't put that in their budget somewhere. It's like, what was the year we beat Alabama? No, we ain't beating Alabama this year. What are we talking about? No, what if we do beat Alabama? We need to make sure we have money to set aside. No. We don't need that. Here you go. And yeah. But Tennessee ends up beating Alabama 52-49. And Tennessee looks really, really good right there in the SEC East. Only time will tell if we'll see anything else transpire from this one, because they still got Georgia on the docket. They still have Kentucky. Those will be 2 major hurdles for the Volunteers. Kentucky will, prove very admirable opponent, as well as Georgia, because right now Georgia looks like it's the best team in the nation. You compare the 2 schedules, Tennessee's looks a little bit better because they've played more ranked opponents. But only time will tell what happens. And speaking of Kentucky, they are playing host to Mississippi State and bringing in, Will Rogers coming into town. And Will Rogers, once again, falls flat, it seems like. I mean, he had 200 yards passing, but he threw a TD and a pick. Levis, he wasn't much better. He only had 230 yards, passing, and a TD and a pick. So, passing-wise, they didn't do so well. It was the running attack by Chris Rodriguez Jr. that took the Wildcats to the next level. He had almost 200 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. He was really the catalyst of the Wildcats' resurgence. Running attack by the Wildcats that, offset the passing inequities by both offenses, really. They really couldn't get too many plays going in there. Levis had a better average than Rogers. And once again, Rogers, it just looked like he fell flat again. This is the second SEC opponent he'd done that against. He did that with LSU as well. But thanks to the running attack by Rodriguez, Kentucky ended up winning 27-17, getting 2-2 in conference play. They're on the outside looking in on the East. I doubt they'll have anything else because they still have, that huge date with Tennessee later on. So we'll see what happens there. Next, we head down to Gainesville to finish off our trip in SEC country, where the Florida Gators played host to LSU in their annual grudge match between two running quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels for the Tigers and Anthony Richardson for the Gators. Richardson had a very bad passing attack. He had 185 yards in the air, 15 of 25. He only threw for 1 touchdown. He was a lot better on the ground, 109 yards and a TD. So he tends to be a running back that seems to pass. And then if you look at Jaden Daniels, almost 350 yards in the air, 3 touchdowns. But he only ran for 44 yards, but he also ran for 3 touchdowns. So the offense runs through Daniels, and if teams can't force him or corral him in any particular way, it makes things difficult. And that's exactly what it is. It was just Florida had no answer to Daniels whatsoever. And it was just, we stop in the air. No, we can't do it. Stop on the ground. Okay, he doesn't put up enough numbers on the ground this time because he had Josh Williams pick up a lot of the slack. He had over 100 yards rushing. But when he was sniffing that end zone, he found ways to score, and that was the difference as LSU pretty much outgunned Florida 45-35, again 3-1 in conference play. So it's a very interesting take and see where they will transpire later on. But they still have some huge games coming up, especially against Alabama, and I'm sure that one's going to be fun. So we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. All right, we'll stay in state and we'll go up to Tallahassee, where the Seminoles are playing host to Clemson. Now, this one looked like it was going to be Clemson's running away, so I think it ended up being too much Clemson early. That Clemson was able to kind of hold back and let Florida State kind of come back a little bit. But with Clemson, DJ Ugale had over 200 yards passing with 3 touchdowns. He had another touchdown on the ground. Will Shipley had over 120 yards rushing, but never found the end zone. Jordan Travis had over 250 yards and 2 touchdowns for Florida State. Rushing was, combined rushing, Florida State had 206 yards compared to Clemson's 167. So you look at it that way, offensively, Florida State had more yards. But Clemson was able to find ways to make it count. And that's the difference, is how can they make things count and make things matter. Florida State's defense looked like they're doing a pretty good job. They had 3 sacks total compared to 2 for Clemson. But like I said, Clemson was able to find ways to make it count, to make those key scores. I mean, they were up 24-14 at the half. They got to 34 by the third. That was it. And the fourth, that's when Florida State started to come back. But I think at that time frame, it was a little bit too late. Clemson was able to hold off any possible comeback by Florida State, beating them 34-28 to give them a nice commanding lead in their division. But it's a crowded division right now in there for the Atlantic of the ACC. Next we head to Syracuse, where the undefeated Orange are playing host to 5-1 Wolfpack, and the Wolfpack was out their star quarterback, Devin Leary, who got hurt last week against Florida State, and he's now out for the rest of the season. So the Wolfpack season looks like in jeopardy because if this is how they play without him, they're in serious trouble. Chambers could not get any rhythm whatsoever. He was 18 of 30 with 160 yards passing, no touchdowns, but he didn't throw a pick, which is a good thing. But the Syracuse defense was just all over them like white on rice. They couldn't get anything going. Schrader for the Orange was efficient enough to have 210 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, but he did throw 2 picks. So that's the only good side with NC State is their defense. Their defense is the ones probably going to keep them in games, but they go against teams like Syracuse or Clemson or Wake Forest. They're going to have issues battling them if their offense doesn't also match the intensity the defense is doing. The defense can only do so much, and it was just too much Syracuse as they were able to just cruise to a 24-9 victory. And they got that date with Clemson for the control of the Atlantic Division in ACC play. Now, another outstanding game in ACC, and one you probably wouldn't really think, and that's between Duke and North Carolina. No, I'm not talking about basketball. I'm talking about football. And the Blue Devils and the Tar Heels were both just put on a show. Defenses be damned, because they just went back and forth. And it came down to the wire. I mean, what else do you expect between these two? Had 380 yards passing with 3 touchdowns, while Leonard was 245 yards passing with a touchdown and only 1 pick. Rushing-wise, Leonard was the dual threat quarterback. He had 130 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Jordan Waters had 91 yards and 2 TDs. And when you look at the North Carolina side, of course, May was the leading rusher. So apparently with these two teams, apparently with these two teams, the quarterback runs through and becomes the focal point of these offenses. And Duke had a better time getting sacks on North Carolina, but it was just back and forth play between the two. Because you looked at towards the end of the game, and this is when Duke was really starting to come along, and they were just making bad decisions. Or not really bad decisions. They just couldn't capitalize on opportunities. That's basically what North Carolina had a hard time capitalizing on opportunities towards the end of the game that were really sealed the deal. Towards the end of the game, because if you look at coming out of the in the second half, there was a 21-17 edge by Duke. So looking at this one, Duke got the first possession in the second half, been punting. North Carolina scored a touchdown. Duke punted again. North Carolina scored a touchdown. Duke went for it on 4th down, missed it. So decent field position for North Carolina. They missed their field goal. And then Duke came down, scored a touchdown. North Carolina had a punt. Duke came down, scored a touchdown. And then North Carolina fumbled. And then Duke missed a field goal. And that's when North Carolina ran down and scored that touchdown, getting them a 38-35 lead. And then Duke was trying to drive, picked off, iced the game. North Carolina escaped Raleigh with a 38-35 victory. They go 3-0 to lead the Coastal, and that might be one half of the ACC championship game if they can maintain that position. We still got quite a few games still left on the docket for that. Next, let's head out to Fort Worth, Texas, where you had a battle of undefeated programs out there in the Big 12, Oklahoma State and TCU. And this one was a barn burner, as they kept continuing to go back and forth. For Oklahoma State's Sanders had 245 yards in the air, a touchdown in the pick, while Duggan, 286 yards in the air, 2 touchdowns. Running attack-wise, Miller was the best running back with 104 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. Sanders had 2 touchdowns on the ground for the Oklahoma State Cowboys, even though their best runner was Richardson, who had 72 yards on the ground and a TD himself. But turnover-wise, it was pretty much even on that aspect. Same thing about sack-wise. It was just Oklahoma State started off on fire early, going up 24-13 at half. But it was a comeback by TCU in the fourth that forced overtime. In overtime, of course, they had to go back and forth. So in the first overtime, they both ended up scoring touchdowns, which sent it to their second overtime, where Oklahoma State was able to then get a field goal. It means TCU had to get a field goal to continue that, or score a touchdown to win. TCU scored a touchdown to win. It was just making the best opportunities of what they had. Because toward the end of the game, they just couldn't do anything to get going. Oklahoma State, got an interception between the two TCU touchdowns, but beyond that, TCU's defense stepped up right when it needed to shut out the Cowboys in the fourth quarter, to force overtime, and a great showdown between these two. We might see them again later in the Big 12 championship. Who knows? Because with Kansas State, and Texas all is nipping at their heels, who knows who's going to be in there in the end for the Big 12. Then we head out to Provo, Utah, where the Cougars are playing host to Arkansas to find out which team is going to rebound. BYU is trying to rebound from the loss to Notre Dame in Vegas. Arkansas is trying to stop their 3-game losing streak and avoid losing 4 in a row. And I think with this one, I was kind of teetering back and forth on who I was going to go with. I went with BYU because they're at home, and I figured they were going to bounce back after that Notre Dame loss and come back and win. I think Hall has an injury, which has kind of limited his play. Jefferson just looked amazing in this game. He was much needed. He's been out for a while for Arkansas, which kind of led to some of their down plays in their season. He had over 360 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. And Ian Hall still had phenomenal numbers, over 350 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. But I think towards the end of the game, you can kind of see him wincing in pain. He wasn't as accurate, and sometimes with deep ball throws. And you can tell before he gets hit, he was favoring his throwing arm as he went down to avoid any further injuries. So I think there's more issues with that. But BYU's run defense failed. Sanders had 175 yards on the ground for the Hogs, scoring 2 touchdowns. And they had no answer for Jefferson either. And he was just making key plays after key plays after key plays. Arkansas just outpaced the Cougars 52-35. They stopped a 3-game slide, putting back in the win column, and trying to see if they can salvage their season moving forward. Now, staying in Utah, we're going to go to Salt Lake City, where the Utes are playing host to USC in a key matchup in the Pac-12. And this one, once again, Utah continues to thwart my picks. Because when I pick them, they lose. When I don't pick them, they win. And if you could tell by how I'm acting, I picked them. And it didn't turn out well, because they came out and played. They started out the game. They have their helmets custom painted to honor 2 fallen teammates they've had. They did the blackout whole series on that one, and it was emotional for them to really, win this one for them. But with this one, it was just once again, defenses be damned, and who needs defense when you have offense that just scores when it can? Caleb Williams is still phenomenal. He had 381 yards passing, 5 touchdowns. Cameron Rising had 415 yards, 2 touchdowns. So Caleb Williams put up more touchdowns, but Rising was better at passing than anything else. Rising had 60 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns himself, which I think probably is the difference in that one, because overall, USC had the better rushing attack, but Utah had the more touchdowns on the ground to balance out what the touchdowns that USC's passing was doing. So you kind of see some of the trend there, and it was just a phenomenal game going back and forth. I mean, it went down to the wire. And gutsy play calling. I mean, there's no question about that one. Because it was just, they were exchanging touchdowns towards the end. It was that touchdown towards the last touchdown Utah had that I would not made, to tell you the truth. They scored a touchdown. Extra point would tie the game. Willingham went, no, we're going for the win. They went for 2. I was screaming at the TVs like, no, don't do it. They put their marbles on the table. They broke the table. Cameron Rising ran in for the 2-point conversion. Took the lead, 43-22. Gave USC a chance. They could not capitalize. End of game. Utah in a beaten USC 43-22. You can see the emotion on Caleb Williams' face. They wanted to go undefeated. Utah needed to win this game to keep themselves in the playoff picture, or the Pac-12 title reign, because them and USC now are the 2 teams behind Oregon and UCLA. So that, the matchups moving forward are going to pay a huge dividend on the outcome of the Pac-12, and could maybe get the Pac-12 into the playoffs, something they haven't seen in a while. And then another key matchup between Pac-12 opponents, between Washington State and Oregon State. Now, both these programs had 1-2 in conference play. They need to get this win and stay with Washington and be like the third wheel, kind of 2 guy, the creepers outside looking in the other top 4. And maybe they can sneak in there. So they had to get this win in here, and both these squads are very good. Cameron Ward for the Cougars had 345 yards passing with a touchdown. They also had a pick. But the difference was Damian Martinez for the Beavers. He had over 100 yards rushing. They didn't do much. The rushing attack for the Oregon State was impressive. Over 200 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns, like I said, led by Martinez. And they countered the passing attack by the Cougars with the Oregon State running attack. And that was one of the key things they had to do to keep things kind of in there. Plus, be able to sack Ward 6 times. He got sacked, which makes things a little more difficult when you can't stay upright. Like I said, you still have phenomenal passing yards, and only 31 picks, so that's pretty good. But Oregon State's defense kind of did the bend don't break. They coughed up a lot of yards, but they didn't really cough up the scores. I mean, they only allowed 1 touchdown. That was it. They only allowed 10 points overall. So kudos for Beavers' defense. They stepped up to the plate, shut down Washington State. 24-10. They kind of kept them hanging around in the Pac-12 title picture. But we'll see if that happens. And that'll bring us to the updated Eliminator. Well, as you see here, no one for the Americans left. All the top 3 right there for American only have 1 loss. For ACC, they lost Florida State and Duke. As we'll see, these teams will start to pick each other off one by one. Now, Big Ten, no one's out yet, or no more additional schools are out yet. As you see, Indiana, Iowa, Rutgers, Michigan State, Wisconsin are all gone. You still leave Ohio State, Michigan undefeated. All right, out in these other ones, the independents are left with Liberty. And they're only one with 1 loss. Notre Dame and BYU are both gone. Of course, the Conference State has no one. Out there in the Big 12, you lost Baylor after getting beat by West Virginia, as well as Iowa State lost to Texas. So if you look at who's left, these are the ones that are going to be battling for the Big 12 title. Right now, TCU is on the top of the heap. Out west, San Jose State has been eliminated in their unexpected loss. So there's no one left for the Mountain West. Out in the pack, Cal losing to Colorado. Got them out to Arizona. is gone, and Washington State's lost to Oregon State's out there. Down south, lost of course, Arkansas's gone, Florida is gone, Auburn's gone, Vandy, A&M, Mizzou. So you still have a long list of teams still available. I think it's really just between three, to tell you the truth, between Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, of which one gets in and who probably gets the number 4 slots, I think. And then with the Sun Belt, you still leave with Coastal and South Alabama. You know, Coastal lost, but they're still hanging in there. Like I said, you take 2 losses to get rid of the group of 5. But there you go. Just my updated Eliminator and a recap of my games. Like I said, I went 8-4, and not too bad in that aspect. So looking forward to next week's action. Should be another fun-filled, exciting week of college football. We'll see which of these matchups coming up that will provide probably the most insight and great times coming up. And we'll get that out to you on Friday. And I think after next week's action is probably when we probably see my implementation of my top 25 get released. I'll probably release it a little bit earlier than College Football Playoff, which doesn't come out till like November 1st. Down below, which game surprised you the most? Which team is flying under the radar right now in terms of polling? Illinois is not getting a lot of love right now, so I'll kind of go with Illini. Who's over it? Tennessee's not getting a lot of love either. I think near TCU. They should be ranked higher. The same thing with Syracuse. I think Syracuse should be the top 10, not Oregon. But hey, that's just me. But let me know down below who you think is overrated, who you think is underrated, which game surprised you the most, which game you look forward to next week. While you're there, make sure you hit that thumbs up once again. You go share this video with friends and family. It helps promote this video out. Once you subscribe, make sure you hit that bell notification. Let you know next time I post any more content on my channel. And I'll see you next time on Chat Sports Talk.